In this video, I'm going to show you how to create the step 3 main screen. So this is the step where they're going to throw 2 balls, one from each hand, crossing in the middle. So this slide is going to be very similar to how we created the step 2 slide, but I will still go through each step one at a time, but we may be able to save a little time by copying and pasting from previous slides. So we're going to first start by putting in the title. So I'm going to just go to the storyboard just to review what this slide will look like. So here's the storyboard slide, step 3, 2 balls, so that will be our title. And then on screen we're going to have these text boxes that will come in one at a time. And the screen is going to look very similar to the other ones. They're all going to look about the same because we're always going to have these buttons here. We're not always going to have a tip box, but for step 2 and 3, we do have this little tip that's going to come up and show us some additional information. And then when we get to the slide layers, we'll put in this tip right here. The avatar is going to be in the same spot. And as I said, the list of buttons, the tip box, and one ball is going to be yellow, one ball is going to be green, and they'll be in either hand. For the main programming considerations, text will appear on screen as the narration plays, triggered by cue points in the timeline. Balls will follow similar arc animation paths from one hand to the other as in the previous step, but in opposite directions, and it will go 4 times, crossing in midair. I inserted a separate slide layer called Throw 2 Balls to create this animation. The tip box will show an additional text box called Slide Layer Tip 2, and it will be triggered when the learner hovers over the box. So right now we're going to look at how to build step 3, the main screen. And in the next video we'll look at how to build step 3 slide layers. So let's input the title now. I'm just going to delete this text box here because we don't need it. And then I'm just going to bold that. And I'm going to make it the same color as all the other ones. So that's this color right here. And you can copy this if you like, or you can use your own color there. So it's all up to you. This doesn't have to look exactly the same as mine. I'm just giving you an example. Okay, so there's the title. And now let's go back to step 2. So go over to the left here, and if you hover over it like we've done before, you can see that this is step 2. And we're going to copy in the buttons and the avatar. So now they should be in the exact same spot as the previous steps. So now let's change the step 2 button here. Let's change the state back to its normal state, so it will be in the pink color like the other ones. So go to states down here, and then change the initial state. Instead of selected, we change that to normal. And now it goes back to pink. And then click on step 3 and go down here, initial state, we want to be selected, the selected state. And now it's blue. Now let's go copy in the text that's going to appear in the top left corner from the storyboard. So I'm going to copy it all at once like I did before, but we have to then adjust a few things. So I'm just going to move it up there to the top left here, and I'm just going to make sure that all these bullets are going to be white. So go over to the home and then go to over to the bullets here. We did this on the previous one, bullets and numbering, and just make sure the color here is selected to the white. There we go. Okay, and now we're going to separate these out like we did before. But one thing about Storyline is it's counting this text box as text box 1. So the next one I want to be text box 2 is going to have to be this second line here. So I'm going to take that one out of there first. And then I'm just going to paste it anywhere. And you can double check that it's the right one by going to the timeline. And you should see text box 1, okay, is this big one here that we're not done with yet. And text box 2 is the one that I just copied out or separated out. And then I'll do the same for the next two. Okay, and then I'm just going to move them over here. We're going to line them up in a minute. Okay, we'll just double check. So that's text box 1, use 2 balls. Text box 2, it highlights it, throw from one hand to the other. Balls should cross in the air, that's text box 3. And text box 4 is practice catching each ball. Okay, so now let's line these up like I did before on the other screens. So right click and go to size and position. So the horizontal pixel position should always be 24. And the vertical placement for this first one will be 60. For the second text box, right click, size and position, horizontal will be 24, and the vertical will be 82. For the third one, right click, size and position, 24 and 104. And the last one here, size and position, 24 and 126. All right, there we go. So now they're lined up. And we can see in the timeline here that they're all going out to about 15 seconds. We'll leave that as the default for now. We can adjust this later once we record the audio. Okay, so now we're going to set the state of the text boxes, like we did on the previous screens, to hidden so that they're not shown when we first get to the slide, and so that we can have them come in with cue points in the timeline. So go down to states, initial state set to hidden. And this one, next one, set the initial state to hidden. The third one here, initial state to hidden. And the fourth one, initial state to hidden. Now let's create arbitrary cue points in the timeline, one for each of the text boxes, that will then trigger to come in with the cue points. So I'm just going to arbitrarily set these cue points in the timeline for now. So I'm just going to go, let's say at 2 seconds, and hit the C button on my keyboard for inserting a cue point. Okay, so now we have 4 cue points, and the next step is to then set triggers for these cue points. So we're doing the same sort of thing on each side. So it'll start to get easier as you go along because you're doing the same sort of process to create these text boxes and have them come in at certain points. So let's go over here to triggers and we'll create a new trigger. So we want to change the state of text box 1, which is the first one, to normal when the timeline reaches cue point 1. New trigger, change the state, text box 2, which is the second one, when the timeline reaches cue point 2. And third one, create a new trigger, change the state of text box 3 when the timeline reaches cue point 3. And the last one, change the state, text box 4 to normal when the timeline reaches cue point 4. There we go. Now we're going to just copy in the tip box that we created in step 2 and paste it here on step 3 because we want it to be the same. So we go back to step 2 here. So I'm in step 2. We have the hotspot over top of it. So one way to be able to see the box that we want is to go up to Arrange and send this hotspot to back. Now click somewhere else for a second and then click back here and you'll be on the tip box that we want. And then we can return that the way it was before or after. So I'm just going to copy this, go back to step 3 here and just paste it in. There we go. So now it should be in the same spot. Now I'm just going to go back to step 2 for a second and just reverse what I did there. So I'm going to click here, go up to Arrange, Send to Back. There we go. And then go back to step 3. All right, now let's just verify these buttons here. They should be correct because we've been copying them in from each screen, but let's just double check. So button 1 jumps to step 1, button 2, step 2 when you click on it, 3, we're on that step, 4, step 4, and button 5, step 5. So that looks correct. And the last step on the main screen, I'll just bring that down a little, is we want to set the play triggers here so that when we click the next button in the player, it's going to go to the next slide that we want. So we're on step 3. So the next step is step 4, which will be throwing 3 balls, but non-continuously. And then the previous step is going to be step 2, 1 ball. All right, so in the next video, I'm going to show you how to create the slide layers associated with this slide, which will be very similar to the step 2 slide layers.